we're going to wrap up the show with a segment that we'll probably do every Thursday now that you're going to join us, because Wednesday nights are pretty heavy schedule in the NBA. So we're going to do our team of the night from last night. This is interpreted however you want to interpret it. So who was your team of the night last night and why?
Yeah, let's get a shout out to the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think one of the biggest margins of victory last night, they win by 30. What I really noticed watching them, I watched most of the first half of that game, was that they're making such an effort to involve Evan Mobley in the offense. Led the team in scoring, 25 points, led the team in shot attempts, 14. He was bringing the ball up the court. They were really running half court action through him. He took 2 threes, made one of them. Like, I really don't buy into the idea that Evan Mobley and Jared Allen can win in the playoffs together long term. But if it's going to happen, it has to happen this way, with Evan Mobley being like a really big part of the offense. And like, I don't know if he's ever going to be a good 3-point shooter. He's got to get to a volume perspective up to like 3 or 4 attempts per game, just enough to get guarded for him to be viable. And like, Kenny Atkinson had Jared Allen in Brooklyn. Like, he got fired over Jared Allen, frankly.
Yeah.
Like, this is a player that he feels very passionate about. I don't think they're going to trade Jared Allen at least before this year's deadline. Like, they're going to try to make it work with these two. And I thought the things they did last night with Evan Mobley were a step in the right direction as far as make it work as much as it's possible, given the shooting deficiencies at play here.
I'm an Evan Mobley believer, and I'm a Kenny Atkinson believer. So yeah, if it can be figured out with these two, I think Kenny would be one of the guys who could crack that code. For me, I'm going to go with the Charlotte Hornets. And this is a kind of a bummer because I think you know, and certainly our listeners and viewers know, that I am a big fan of the Houston Rockets. I think maybe misguidedly picked them to make the playoffs to play in this season. I'm still a believer. They're very, very deep. Ime Udoka, I think, was ahead of the curve last season. Alperen Sengun is like a little mini Joker or Sabonis starter kit. All these good things, right? None of that was on display last night. The Houston Rockets should not lose at home to my team of the night, the Charlotte Hornets. The Charlotte Hornets last night, LaMelo Ball comes back, didn't play much last season, looked every bit as good as we remember LaMelo Ball looking. But this is a team, Sam, the Charlotte Hornets, who don't have huge expectations. Brandon Miller went out early with a hip injury, and they were on the road. Last year, they won exactly 10 games on the road. Not a good road team. Houston Rockets, conversely, a very good home team last season. And somehow, down a significant man on the road, LaMelo Ball and the Charlotte Hornets upend the Houston Rockets in the first game of the season when the Rockets have high expectations and the Charlotte Hornets have none. Kudos to the Charlotte Hornets. Charles Lee, way to go, man. But what? Question mark, exclamation point.
We might have been a little premature when we said like the bottom 5 in the East is totally set. Or like, I think there's a pretty clear distinction between where Charlotte is and where like the Wizards are. Don't worry. Like, how many Thursday shows are we going to do this year? Like 25, 26, something like that. I think I'll pick the Wizards as my team 11 or 12 times. Unfortunately, I couldn't last night. The Hornets are clearly a cut above that. Like, the Hornets of last night looked like a team that could maybe compete for a play-in. Like, Trey Mann, 24 points off the bench. Like, all right. Like, you guys look like you're discovering some young players. You're well coached by a very, very respected assistant in Charles Lee. I didn't watch too much of that game. I caught a couple of the last few minutes.
I will say
there was a moment, you can correct me on the details here. It was either Grant Williams setting an illegal screen on Dillon Brooks or Dillon Brooks setting an illegal screen on Grant Williams. And I remember one of them, whoever didn't get the call, was like furious about it. And I remember thinking, like, there has never been a less sympathetic foul all across the board. Where, like, I don't know who I'm rooting for here.
Yeah, that's very funny. Both of those guys are just the Spider-Man meme pointing at each other. But no, I mean, like, I was last year and then continue to be this year, despite last night's results, very high on the Houston Rockets. They're a fun watch. They got a lot of guys. That's like a perfect nerd team for me, where you look at them and you go, it's not a KD team or a Steph team or a LeBron team. It's just like 8 guys on that. Like, it's a Tari Eason situation with, next to Amin Thompson, where you're like, they just have useful basketball players across the board and greater than the sum of their parts. Right. And then last night they just faceplant. And I'm like, well, if you're going to be a serious team, if you're supposed to be chasing down, the Warriors or whoever else is at the back end of the play-in, you cannot lose at home to the Charlotte Hornets.
Yeah, that's a bad loss. I will say, like, it's a team that for the last few years, even like you see these little glimpses where like, God, Jalen Green is so athletic, and
Mhm.
you see like 1 or 2 finishes every game where you're just like, man, if he like integrates a little bit of craft here, it's gonna be great. And Şengün, it's a lot of the same thing. Right now, like they're very much a team that's figuring out who they are in a way that like I thought they would have gotten there last year, but no, we're still doing this year. Like they have
Mhm.
too many guys. They're figuring out like
They do.
who they really want to feature. Green and Şengün both got contracts, and I thought both of them were good contracts, but there's clearly still some identity stuff going on here. Where down the stretch, I didn't feel like they knew what they wanted to do, who they wanted to be. I'm with you. I think they are a play-in team. They're a little further behind than I thought they'd be at this point.
The problem with being a playing team, though, like we mentioned on the prediction show, is that in the Western Conference, it's like, okay, well, now you got to leave somebody out. So I don't know. Might have gotten over my skis a little bit on that one, but congratulations to my team of the night, the team I've always rooted for, the Charlotte Hornets.